The bathroom was a blood-stained canvas. Lisa's eyes went wide with horror, her breath hitching as she took in the carnage. Blood coated the white tile floor in dark, violent streams, spreading out from where her friends had fallen. The thick, suffocating scent filled the room, and the low buzzing in her ears grew louder as Candyman stepped closer, his hook gleaming. A tall, imposing figure with dark skin, dressed in a fur coat, holding a hook where his hand once was, his mouth filled with bees, a remnant of his torturous death. Jamal lay crumpled against the wall, his mouth still slightly open in disbelief. He'd tried to reason with Candyman, begged for mercy, but his words had barely registered before Candyman's hook plunged into his chest, tearing him open in a spray of red. His eyes were now dull, the last flicker of life gone. Steve staggered back, blood dripping from a gash on his neck, his voice a choked whisper. "We didn't mean to—" His plea ended as Candyman's hook arced through the air, catching him in the gut and ripping upward. Steve's body folded, collapsing to the floor with a sickening thud, his lifeless eyes staring up at nothing. Kim was next, her screams ricocheting off the bathroom walls, rising and falling in a rhythm of terror and pain. She tried to claw her way out, slipping on the blood-slicked floor, but Candyman grabbed her by the shoulder, his grip like iron. She whimpered, her strength failing her as he brought his hook down, the blade splitting her scream in two as it tore through flesh and bone. Lisa watched, frozen, her heart pounding so hard she could barely breathe. She knew she was next. Candyman's voice, rich with malevolence, echoed around her. "Say my name!" She stumbled backward, her feet slipping in the blood of her friends, the walls closing in. She could still hear the buzzing, the terrible symphony of Candyman's approach, but as his hook hovered above her, the scene began to blur, the horror fading. 24 hours earlier, the group had met up on a dare, brought together by Steve's cocky challenge to summon the infamous Candyman. Lisa had scoffed at first, brushing it off as urban legend nonsense. Kim was hesitant, but didn't want to seem scared in front of the others. Jamal, the oldest and most superstitious of the group, had warned them about what they were about to do, but even he couldn't resist the pull of curiosity. They gathered in the dingy Cabrini-Green bathroom, the air thick with the scent of mildew and regret. Lisa looked around at her friends, a nervous grin on her face. "All right, let's get this over with. 5 times, right?" Jamal shook his head, pacing near the bathroom door as if he couldn't bear to watch. "Man, this is stupid. This whole damn story, it's not some joke. People died in here." "Come on, Jamal," Steve laughed, trying to mask his own unease. "It's just a ghost story. You say his name, get freaked out, and that's it. If he's real, where's he been for the last 30 years? Probably resting like a normal dead person," Jamal muttered. But he stayed, hands stuffed deep in his pockets, his jaw set. Lisa glanced at him, a little spark of guilt flickering in her gut, but she brushed it off. They were all in on it now. "Fine," she said, looking at the cracked mirror. Her reflection stared back, hollow-eyed and pale. "Let's do this." One by one, they repeated the name, voices mingling in a low chant that bounced off the walls, filling the small space with a sinister rhythm. "Candyman, Candyman, Candyman." By the 4th time, Kim looked like she might bolt. She took a shaky breath, clutching the edge of the sink, her knuckles white. "Candyman." A beat of silence filled the air, stretching unbearably long. They exchanged glances, each of them feeling the shift, as though the room itself was holding its breath. The tension settled over them, thick and cold. "See? Nothing," Steve said, laughing again, though his eyes darted around the room as if expecting something to leap out at him. But then, the laughter died on his lips. The room had grown darker, the flickering light above them dimming as if the shadows themselves were closing in. A buzzing sound filled the silence, faint at first, like the hum of electricity, but quickly rising, drowning out their nervous breaths. It was the sound of bees, a swarm, angry and insistent, filling every corner, vibrating through their bones. Kim gasped, backing against the wall, her eyes darting to the mirror. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. Instead, she pointed, her hand shaking. The mirror seemed to ripple, the surface warping, and then they saw it, his silhouette, standing tall and menacing, his eyes gleaming with a deadly hunger. Candyman. Steve tried to laugh, to dismiss it as a trick, but his voice cracked. It's just a reflection, right? Just some stupid... But his words were cut short as Candyman stepped forward, out of the mirror, his hook gleaming in the dim light. Panic erupted, each of them scrambling, knocking into each other, desperate to escape. Lisa clawed at the door, but it wouldn't budge. The handle stuck fast as if sealed by some unseen force. Candyman moved slowly, deliberately, his eyes scanning each of them with a kind of cruel anticipation. He took his time, savouring their fear, like a wolf circling its prey. Jamal shoved Steve toward Candyman, his voice cracking. "We need to get out. Push him or something. Do something." Steve's face twisted in terror and betrayal, but he tried to swing at Candyman, his fists flailing in desperation. Candyman barely reacted, reaching out with one swift motion, his hook slicing into Steve's shoulder and tearing down with a sickening sound. Steve's scream echoed, cut off only when Candyman's hook plunged again, faster, ripping through flesh. Kim was next, her legs giving out as she tried to back away. She tripped on the blood-slicked floor, falling hard, her eyes wide with pleading terror as Candyman turned toward her. "Please, no, we didn't mean it." Candyman tilted his head, his expression one of mocking pity. "You called me," he said, his voice a low, resonant growl that seemed to vibrate through her bones. "Say my name." The hook swung down, the edge catching her throat, and she collapsed in a crimson spray, her eyes staring into nothingness. Jamal was the last, his legs shaking as he backed into the corner, hands up in a useless shield. He looked at Lisa, his eyes wide, pleading, "Lisa, do something. Please." But she was frozen, her gaze locked on the horror in front of her. Candyman stepped over the bodies, his hook dripping, a dark satisfaction in his eyes as he advanced on Jamal. Jamal swallowed hard, tears streaming down his face. "I was trying to stop them. I didn't even want to say the name, man." Candyman paused as if considering. But then, with a swift, brutal motion, he brought the hook down, silencing Jamal's pleas forever. Lisa stood alone, her hands shaking, her mind a blur of terror and disbelief. The buzzing filled the room, louder now, an endless hum that drowned out everything else. She backed up, her back pressing against the cold, unyielding wall. There was nowhere left to run. Candyman's face loomed close, his voice a dark whisper. "Say my name." Her scream filled the air, fading into the endless buzzing as everything went dark. The final whisper. The officers stood frozen at the doorway, the stench of copper and decay thick in the air. The light that filtered in through the dusty blinds barely touched the darkness, as if even the sun itself was unwilling to cast its gaze on the room's horrors. Detective Samuels, a veteran of the precinct, broke the silence first, his voice barely a whisper. "What the hell happened here?" His partner, Officer Garcia, swallowed hard, unable to tear his eyes away from the words scrawled in blood across the mirror. "What's blood for, if not for shedding?" The words seemed to pulse, each letter mocking them from within the shattered glass. Garcia muttered under his breath, "We need to get out of here, now." Outside, the crowd grew as word spread throughout Cabrini-Green. Whispers of Candyman rippled through the crowd, some spoken in hushed reverence, others with barely concealed fear. And yet in those fearful glances something ancient and powerful stirred, a sense of dread as old as the legends themselves. Among the crowd, a young girl named Maya tugged on her mother's sleeve, her eyes wide with innocent curiosity. "Mama," she whispered, "who's Candyman?" Her mother's face blanched as she bent down, gripping Maya's shoulders tightly. "Don't ever say his name, baby," she warned, her voice trembling, "not even once." But Maya's curiosity lingered, and as they walked away, her gaze drifted back to the broken windows of the apartment. From the darkness inside, a faint, familiar voice carried on the wind, weaving itself into the whispers of the crowd. It was deep, hypnotic, and darkly inviting, Say my name.
Bloody Mary's Horror Stories. Watch, like and subscribe.